Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I'm joined by Chris of Strange Monkey Reviews. How you doing today, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Looks like your face has seen better days, but so is mine. So it looks like we're in the same boat there.
Oh, yeah. Supposed to go to a doctor, get this eye fixed, but we'll see what happens.
Besides that, it looks okay.
Thank you.
Well, for those of you that don't know Chris, since 2018, he's been reviewing horror and sci-fi movies, as well as releasing other content, such as voice impressions, countdowns, random horror thoughts, and upcoming podcasts that he has as well. Last but not least, Horror Freaks. Now, the thing about Horror Freaks, it's a series which consists of interviews featuring other YouTubers and an occasional actor or celebrity. He's also collaborated with several content creators in the past. Now, you guys don't have to go searching for Chris and Strange Monkey because it's all right down here in the description. I have all his social media links as well as the YouTube links right in the description. So a little bit about Horror Freaks. What exactly does that entail? What do you guys do on Horror Freaks?
Well, not only do I interview different content creators or the occasional celebrity, but I like to throw in a few old school commercials in between just to make it entertaining. Like it's basically like if you're watching an actual show on TV. Yeah. And I also create segments with another character that I have called Noodles. He's like a monkey puppet. He's like my co-host basically. So
sure.
I'll throw in another random segment. So as the seasons progress, I come up with new characters, just to throw in some funny little thing in there in between. So yeah, that's
awesome.
Basically what I do. Yeah.
That's so cool. And you guys can check that out. Like I said, the links are in the description. So make sure you're checking this out. Show him some love. Hit that follow button on social media. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Not for me, not for Strange Monkey Reviews, but for you. You're going to want to do it for yourself, so you're not missing any of his content. But the reason I brought you here today, man, something very special I want to know. Horror is very important to you as it is me. But it all starts somewhere.
That's
so
right.
I brought you on here. I want to know, go back to the past. I want to know what your first horror movie was. And Chris, your first horror movie was?
Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Oh, dude, what a dope glove, man.
Thank you. I made it myself.
Yeah, that's sick. Do you remember how old you were the first time you had seen it, Chris?
I think I was about 5 years old because back then when these movies were released on home video, we had to wait a little bit longer for them to be in video stores and whatnot. So I want to say I was about 5.
Man, and this is a movie that has finally started to gather the cult following that I feel like it deserves. Because without Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the horror genre would not be what it is today. And people can poo-poo at me for that. But if you didn't have Wes Craven's New Nightmare, you wouldn't have Scream. And if you didn't have Scream... Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to let you finish. It's true, though, because this movie walked so that Scream could fly.
Yep.
And I don't think that the world was ready for New Nightmare because he tried to take something that was already established and do something new. And I think fans at that time were just tired of Freddy because, in the previous film, they killed him off. It's over. And then, I guess people they saw that trailer, they're like, what the hell's this? Like another Freddy Krueger movie? So I guess that's what happened there. But there's a very unique film. When you put all that aside, this is a very good movie.
And it's a lot scarier than the previous probably 3 or 4 installments. We're back to having a dark Freddy Krueger. And something I love about this movie when you watch it, and I never realized this as a kid, because I didn't pay attention to this type of stuff. There's no title card. There's no opening credits. The movie just starts. The movie just starts like real life.
Yeah, you would assume that it's a Freddy Krueger movie, and all of a sudden you slowly start to realize that this is a meta film that takes place in the real world. And as a kid, when I watched it, I had no idea what was going on. This was my introduction to Freddy, so I just went with it. And when I was a teenager, I realized that this is taking place in the real world, and I'm like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. As a teenager, I did not appreciate it, but now, years later, I appreciate it for what it is.
And so do I. I love this film. I can genuinely say I love this film.
Right. I mean, it's one of the best in the franchise. I do have a little story, if you don't mind, if I could share.
Absolutely.
So this is how I learned about Freddy when I was a kid. There was this movie called Man's Best Friend. Have you ever heard of this movie with Lance Henriksen?
Hmm.
It's about this killer doll, or not a killer doll, killer dog, or something like that. They were doing experiments. He's like this crazy Terminator dog that goes after people, or something like that. So on
Okay.
this VHS tape, the new Nightmare trailer is on this tape, and I had no idea who Freddy Krueger was at all. And I'm watching this trailer, and there's nothing at all. And then at the very end of the trailer, it says coming soon, and then Freddy emerges, and he's like, "Miss me."
Wes Craven's new Nightmare. Miss me?
And I just ran to my living room. I was scared shitless, and I'm just sitting there. And this kid that I used to be friends with pops up from behind me, and he's like, "Miss me?" And I'm like, "Stop it! Stop it!"
Right.
So time goes
After
on,
I'm done
you
cleaning
know.
up this pits in my pants, you can get your ass right home.
Yeah, like I did never seen anything, and that was the upgraded Freddy, and he's supposed to be more horrific. So a few months go by, I see the poster at my video store, and I'm like, "Oh God, it's him," you know. And every time I would misbehave, my mom would use that against me. She's like, "Behave, or Freddy's gonna get you." And eventually, she rents the movie, and I'm like, "Oh shit, I gotta deal with this now." So I watched the movie, and the scenes that stuck out to me it was the one where Heather looks into her closet, and he pops out and he says, "Miss me," and he runs after her and all that. And the scene where the babysitter is trying to protect the son, and Freddy comes out of nowhere and just drags her up to the ceiling, kind of like how Tina was. It's the same thing with Tina in the first one. So I think that was an homage to that scene. And then once it was over, with, and when they burned up Freddy, when he tried to eat up the son and everything, like that's another one that stuck out to me. He's like, "I'm gonna eat you up," and his face starts opening up. I'm like, "Oh my God!" And when they burned them up, I was like, "Oh, it's over. It's over with." And as a kid, I figured, well, I did it. I conquered my fear. It was a very intense movie, and like you said, this was a very scary film. Like compared to the other ones, it was no more prankster Freddy. It was back to being serious, and I think that's what Wes Craven wanted to accomplish at that time. You know, so let's go back to basics here. The fun and games are over. You know,
absolutely. And you just killed two birds with one stone with that, because I was going to ask you which scene it was that affected you the most, and now I know that. But now we're going to dig into one that you kind of touched on, but I want to get a deep dive into it. Your favorite kill from the movie. Now, we obviously know what your favorite kill was with the babysitter. And what you were just talking about with how you think it's an homage to Tina, I love the fact that you brought that up. So I 100% agree. Now, what I like about this one, in comparison to the Tina one, we got a good boy there. Yeah, and what I love about this scene is in comparison to A Nightmare on Elm Street. In A Nightmare on Elm Street, you got Tina being dragged up the wall, and you have Rod sitting there, "Tina!" And in this one, you have that same situation happening. But the difference is now, at certain points, you see her doing that with Dylan, trying to reach out and help her. But you also see Freddy at certain points. Where in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, you never see Freddy Krueger during that scene. All you see during that whole scene is Freddy dragging her up the wall, her being dragged up the wall, and the cuts, and then her falling and hitting the bed. Freddy Krueger's never seen in that scene. But in Wes Craven's Nightmare, I hate saying Freddy Krueger because it's not. It's the Dream Demon is actually seen during certain clips of it. I think it's fucking brilliant how they did the same thing, but so much different in this movie.
Yeah, because you're seeing it from his point of view at one point, and then we're basically seeing what us as the audience is like. There's nothing there, and the babysitter looks around, and she says, "There's nothing there, Dylan." And then he looks up, and he emerges from right behind her. I'm like, "Oh shit, here we go." So it's a very interesting scene. I watched it earlier just to prepare for this. It's to refresh my memory, and it was a very effective scene, pretty brutal, because he showed no mercy in that scene. And I love it when he goes up to Dylan and he's like, "Ever play Skin the Cat?"
Yes, the Skin the Cat scene. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
and it was nice. It was a nice refresher to see a dark, because they couldn't make Freddy Krueger hateable, if that makes any sense.
No.
Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger has so much charisma, you can't hate him. You're always kind of rooting for him, and then you feel like I'm rooting for a child killer right now. Like that's always
he's
but
such
that's
a
why they
horrible
brought back this
person.
dream demon. But at the same time, you also have Robert Englund in the movie as Robert Englund and also as the dream demon, obviously. But this dream demon is so easy to hate because of how dark he is.
I always thought that was interesting. The scene where Heather calls Robert, because she's worried and he's painting something, but you don't see until, he's just, he's really into it, and then you see exactly what Heather is describing to him. She's like, "It's Freddy," and he's like, "Oh, darker," and she's like, "Yeah. How did you know?" He's like, "Oh, lucky guess." I'm like, "No, that's bullshit, sir." And you see that it's just to me, it seems like Robert knew what was going on, but he kept this distance, because then later on, Wes Craven tells her that this thing, Freddy, is an entity trapped in these movies, and you just have to keep making these movies, and then after some time he moves on to something else, but he sort of enjoys being Freddy, and it's like all hell's breaking loose, and they have to contain this, and she has to play Nancy one more time. So I always thought that was interesting. Who knows what was going on, what other ideas Wes had for this, had they kept going, if it was a success, but I guess we'll never know.
Right, but on the flip side to that, if this was a success, we may have never gotten Scream. So I mean,
That's
Butterfly
true.
Effect. So I love the fact it's got a cult following now, but I also do love the fact that it failed at first because it gave us Scream. Wes, like you said, he dipped his toes in the water. After this, he fucking dove in head, and he said, "Let's just go with it."
Yeah, and
while we're on the subject of Scream, so we know what your first horror movie was, Chris, being Wes Craven's New Nightmare. But my little buddy Ghostface, while we're talking about Scream, he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Chris? What is your favorite horror movie?
The original Halloween. Masterpiece. I can never get tired of that movie. I think that was another one that I rented back in the day, and I just remember the ending when Loomis shot him off the balcony and he was gone, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is crazy.
You shot him 6 times.
That's 6 times. He's not human. I always do Loomis impressions just to make people laugh. It's just good
awesome,
stuff,
man. Like Loomis was such a character.
He was. I remember seeing, like, Donald Pleasance was talking about he would stop at Halloween 22 or something like that. You can tell he loved that character very much. I got to see Halloween at a drive-in last year with my girlfriend on Halloween night, which was really cool. They did it back to back with Halloween 3. Just quite an experience. I thought it was really cool.
And Halloween 3 is one of my favorites in the franchise. Now, I want to bounce back to Wes Craven's New Nightmare here for a second, Chris. We talked about what scene affected you the most, but what would you say your favorite scene from Wes Craven's New Nightmare is?
Oh man, there's so many, because I think it's the scene where Heather was running away from Freddy, or no, actually I want to say the final act, just in general, where Heather has to go after Dylan, because this is where the cinematography is very effective in this movie, because you can tell, compared to the other Wes Craven films, the set pieces, the gigantic layer where she comes out of like this Freddy statue, it's coming out of his mouth, and it's like a waterfall, and she's going after him, and it's like shit's now, because he's hiding him in this lair, and they have to get away from him, and you don't know where he's at. And I thought it was very creepy atmosphere. That's what I'm trying to say. But that whole thing where he uses his tongue to like tie around Heather's face or whatever, and they had to trap him and burn him. Like, there's snakes all over the place. They just have to be very careful and whatnot. I thought it was pretty awesome how they did that.
See, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that you get the scene of Dylan running across the road and Freddy from the clouds playing with him, and then you get the army of Freddys that are running at him.
That's right. I always forget about that. Because you see this giant Freddy in the sky and the clouds, and he's just like bringing him up, and I'm thinking, oh my god! And then Heather gets hit by the car, and I'm thinking that woman should be dead.
Yes, man. Great
And she
stunt
just
person
kept
there.
on. Yeah, the way she just jumped at that car, I was like, damn, that was amazing. But yeah, that's another scene that was very memorable. But for some reason, I forget about it all the time. Every time I watch it, I'm like, wait a minute, that's right, Freddy in the clouds.
Yep.
Good stuff.
So, since this is Wes Craven's New Nightmare is a part of a franchise, a very well-known franchise at that rate, I always ask this question. Of the original 8, and you count Freddy vs. Jason if you want to count the remake, that's 9 Nightmare on Elm Street flicks. What would you say is your favorite of the franchise?
Well, I do count all of them. They're all entertaining, because it's the same thing with Friday the 13th movies. You would have to count Freddy versus Jason because this continues both of their journeys. But out of all of them, I'm going to say the original. What Wes Craven and his crew were able to achieve at that time with the budget that they had, it's just incredible. Especially the scene where Johnny Depp's character dies, and I think they turned the room, they built it was upside down, and they poured the blood in this giant hole to make it seem like it was coming up out of the bed. That was incredible.
Yeah. One of my top 3 favorite practical effect movies of all time, along with The Thing and American Werewolf in London. Those are easily my 3 favorite practical effect movies of all time.
That's amazing.
Especially, like you said, for the budget they had. I mean, the budget was so low on the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy's in the movie for 7 minutes on screen because they were so worried that the makeup would look so different. Yeah, if you rewatch the original Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger himself is on screen visible for 7 minutes of the film.
That's amazing. I never knew that.
A lot of it, like him
that's
dragging
kind of like
Tina's
how
body.
Anthony Hopkins. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
had
why
no
it looked like
idea.
the body bag dragging her up the wall or the water bed. Even when the mom's killing Freddy on the bed, like you never see him. Like it's all just
it's
implied.
And I think that it's one of those less is more situations.
Yes.
Where there's a threat, but then you don't see him until later on. And I noticed that in New Nightmare, you don't see Freddy completely until maybe about an hour into the film.
Yeah.
You see his arms and you see shadows, and I paused it to see. I'm like, wow, we're about an hour in. That's amazing. But I was gonna say that it's kind of like how Anthony Hopkins was in Silence of the Lambs for just that same amount of time, and the man won an Oscar. He left a good impression.
That's how it should be. Less is more. The only thing I wish that I could change about the original Nightmare on Elm Street, you guys can find this on YouTube, and I'll put a link for it in the description as well. There's a deleted scene where when they're downstairs in the basement and Nancy's mom is talking to Nancy when she gives him Freddy's glove, you find out that Nancy had a sibling, and Nancy's sibling is the one that Freddy killed, and that's why they went after him and they kept his stuff or the hat.
Right.
She has the hat. I think that would have been an amazing tidbit to leave in the film, to know that Nancy's sibling was killed by Freddy Krueger.
I remember watching that a few years ago, and I had no idea. I knew about the multiple endings that they shot where Freddy's driving away and all that, but when I saw that, I was like, wow, that really could have changed a lot, because that gives them a reason to go after Freddy, not just, he's killing everybody. It's just they had enough, but who knows how things would have turned out.
Right.
Very personal.
So, Chris, I appreciate having you on here, and I appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with me here for a little bit and talk about your first horror movie. But before I let you go, I always ask the same question. We're going to go back to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and we're going to be judging this movie on a skull count. Now, Chris, we're not judging it on acting, production, quality, score. We're not being critics. Right now, we're strictly judging this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, 0 to 5 skulls, 0 being the worst and 5 being the best. What would your ranking of Wes Craven's New Nightmare be, my friend?
Well, we're going on how it affected me. I'm gonna say 5, because it just absolutely scared the hell out of me. I ran out of that room when I first saw Freddy. So that you have to give it the highest amount of skulls. So yeah, definitely a 5. Yeah.
And it's so amazing to see that horror has gone this far for you, and for you guys to see how far it's gone for him. Click the links down here in the description. Subscribe to the YouTube, follow on social media. I promise you won't regret it. I love talking to this guy, and I'm really hopeful we get to work together again in the future, whether it's here or with you on your page. I'm just really hopeful that we'll get to work together again in the future.
Of course.
Chris, don't go anywhere, man. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.